The wagon wheels ground against hard-packed earth as Abigail Turner pressed her palm flat against the page to steady it. The ledger refused to lie even when everything else had. Ink marked the truth in careful columns: dwindling feed, delayed payments, a herd that had nearly broken under drought before she forced order into chaos with nothing but calculation and refusal to let it fail. The wind pressed dust through the seams of the window, carrying the scent of dry grass and old iron. She did not look up at first when the sound reached her. Wagons came and went. Men arrived with promises and left with excuses. Hope had trained her to be cautious. Then she heard the cadence of the horse. Her hand stilled. There was a way a man rode when he owned the land beneath him. Even absence did not erase it. She rose slowly, not trusting the sudden tightness in her chest, and stepped toward the window. The horizon shimmered in heat, the road stretching thin and pale until it bent out of sight. And there, emerging through dust and distance, was a figure she had memorized once and forced herself to forget piece by piece. Nathan Hale sat rigid in the saddle of a single horse wagon, shoulders broader, posture harder, like time had carved him instead of softened him. For a moment, something in her chest eased, despite everything she had taught herself not to expect. Then she saw the woman beside him. The relief did not shatter. It tightened, drew inward, became something quieter and more dangerous. Abigail did not move as the wagon approached. She did not step out into the yard like someone who had waited. She stood where she was, letting the moment come to her instead of meeting it halfway. 3 years had taught her that much. The wagon came to a stop. The horse stamped once. Nathan climbed down first, boots hitting the ground with the same controlled weight she remembered. He did not look toward the house immediately. He adjusted the reins, his movements deliberate, contained. The woman remained seated until he stepped aside. He did not offer his hand. She did not ask for it. She descended with care, gloved fingers brushing the edge of the wagon, her dress too fine for dust and distance. Abigail noticed everything. The door opened behind her. Briggs stood there, hat in hand, unease plain in the set of his shoulders. "He's back." "Yes," Abigail said, her voice even. "He is, and he's brought. I can see that as well." She stepped past him and out onto the porch. The wood creaked beneath her boots. The air held the smell of horse sweat, sun, and long travel. Nathan turned then, as if he had known precisely when she would appear. They looked at each other without greeting. "You're here," he said. "I am." His gaze moved over her quickly, assessing without apology. Then toward the house, the barn, the stretch of land that had not collapsed in his absence. "You kept it standing." "I had reason to." The woman stepped forward slightly. Nathan spoke without looking at her. "This is Eleanor." Abigail inclined her head. "Mrs. Hale." The hesitation came again, small, controlled. Then the woman nodded. "Yes." The word settled like a stone dropped into still water. Abigail felt the ripples but did not show them. "You've traveled far," she said. "There's water inside." Nathan's attention sharpened. "You're staying." "I have been. The arrangements changed." "So I see." Silence stretched. Eleanor's presence shifted the space between them, not loudly, but with insistence. "I wrote," Nathan said. "No," Abigail replied. "You did not." His jaw tightened. "I intended to." "Intentions do not arrive." Eleanor's voice came low. "Nathan." He raised a hand, stopping her without looking. Abigail watched that gesture more than his words. "You've been paid?" he asked. "No." "Why not?" "Because the ranch could not afford it, and because leaving would have meant its failure, and you stayed." "Yes." He studied her then, differently than before, as if measuring something he had not anticipated finding intact. "You could have gone." "I could have." "I did not." Eleanor stepped forward, her tone measured, controlled. "We are grateful, Miss Turner." "Truly. But circumstances are not what they were." Abigail met her gaze. "No, they are not. What do you intend to do?" "I intend to finish what I started." Nathan's eyes shifted, something flickering beneath the surface. "That ain't necessary." "It is." "I'll handle it." "You were not here to." The words landed between them, heavier than she meant and yet exactly as she meant. "I'm here now," he said. "And I have been." Eleanor's breath tightened slightly. "This is not productive." "No," Abigail said softly. It is not. She stepped back. You may take the main room. I will move my things by evening. Nathan frowned. You're not being turned out. I'm not staying where I am no longer required. That ain't what this is. Then what is it? He did not answer. Eleanor did. It is a marriage. Abigail nodded once. Yes. She turned and went inside. The air felt cooler within the walls. The scent of wood smoke grounded her, steadied the part of her that had threatened to shift. She moved with precision, gathering her belongings, folding what little she owned into careful order. She did not rush. She did not falter. 3 years reduced to what she could carry. The ledger remained last. Always last. Her hand rested on its worn cover. Every page held proof she had not wasted what he left behind. She lifted it. Outside, the wind shifted. Inside, Abigail Turner prepared to leave the life she had built for a man who had returned with a wife. By the second morning, the house had changed in ways that could not be undone. Eleanor Hale moved through it with quiet authority, her presence reshaping spaces that had once belonged to routine rather than ownership. The curtains were drawn differently, the kitchen arranged with a precision that came from expectation rather than necessity. Abigail noticed everything, though she said little. She had not left. That fact alone unsettled Nathan more than her departure would have. You're still here, he said, standing in the doorway as she reviewed the ledger again. Yes? I thought you were leaving. I said I would move my things. I did not say I would abandon unfinished work. You're not obligated. No, she said. I am not. The distinction held. Eleanor watched from the table, her hands folded neatly, her posture untouched by the tension that moved through the room. Nathan, she said, her tone gentle but firm. Miss Turner has been clear in her intentions. That doesn't make them necessary. Abigail did not look up. The accounts will collapse without continuity. I'll manage them. You will not. The silence that followed sharpened. Nathan stepped forward. You think I can't? I think, Abigail said calmly, that you have been absent from the details that kept this place alive. Eleanor's gaze flicked between them, something thoughtful settling beneath her composure. Nathan exhaled slowly. 3 days, he said. You finish what you need. Then you go. Abigail closed the ledger. A week. That ain't happening. A week ensures stability. 3 days. 5. He studied her, measured, then nodded once. 5. Eleanor's expression did not change, but something in her attention sharpened. 5 days, Abigail repeated. She returned to the ledger. Nathan left the room. Eleanor remained. You are very certain, she said after a moment. I am careful. That is not the same thing. No, Abigail agreed. It is not. Eleanor's gaze rested on her. Nathan respects certainty. Abigail did not respond, even when he resists it. I have observed that. Eleanor allowed a faint pause. Then you understand your position here is transitional. Abigail looked up then. Everything is. The words held weight Eleanor did not dismiss. I did not expect to find someone already embedded in this life, Eleanor said quietly. I did not expect him to return married. Their eyes held. A different understanding passed between them, not kindness, not yet, but recognition of something shared and unwanted. Eleanor inclined her head slightly. Then we are both adjusting. Yes, Abigail said, we are. 3 days passed, then 4, then 5. The work did not slow. Nathan watched more than he spoke. Abigail moved through the ranch with a precision that did not ask for permission. She corrected accounts, reassigned labor, inspected the herd with a practiced eye that missed nothing. She did not explain herself, unless required. He followed her once without announcing it. She knew. Those calves will not last another week without supplemental feed, she said without turning. I see that. Then act on it. You're giving orders now? I'm stating facts. He almost smiled. Almost. By the 6th morning, the ranch no longer felt like something held together by absence. It moved with rhythm again. That unsettled him more than its former disarray ever had, Eleanor observed quietly. You watch her, she said that evening. Nathan did not look up. I watch everything on my land. Not like that. He said nothing. She is capable, Eleanor continued, more than I anticipated. She kept it alive. Yes, A pause. And you did not know she could. He looked at her then. You're making a point. I'm observing. He returned his attention to the table. Observation's a habit around here. Eleanor's voice softened slightly. So is resistance. By the 7th day, the departure Abigail had planned no longer felt simple, because Nathan had not asked her to leave again, and she had not reminded him. Instead, they worked, side by side, not close, not yet, but no longer separate. The storm came without warning. Dark clouds rolled in fast, swallowing the horizon. Wind tore through the fields, sharp and immediate. The air changed in a way that made even the horses uneasy. "Get them in," Nathan called. Abigail was already moving. They worked without discussion. Gates opened. Lines pulled tight. Hands moved in rhythm that had nothing to do with familiarity and everything to do with necessity. Rain hit hard, cold, unforgiving. Mud pulled at boots. Visibility dropped. A calf broke from the herd. Abigail went after it. Abigail, she didn't stop. Nathan followed. The ground shifted beneath them. The calf stumbled near the creek bed, its legs sliding dangerously close to the edge. Abigail reached it first, gripping its flank, steadying it with force that came from practice rather than strength. "It's panicking," she said. "I can see that." Then stopped talking. He moved beside her, anchoring the animal while she adjusted its footing. Their hands brushed, just once, but it held. The storm roared around them. The calf steadied. They led it back together. When they reached the barn, soaked through, breath heavy, something had shifted. Not spoken, but present. Nathan looked at her differently, not as someone who had remained, but as someone who had stood beside him, and did not intend to step back. That night the storm settled into a steady rain. The house felt smaller, warmer. Eleanor sat near the stove, her expression thoughtful. "You could stay," Nathan said abruptly. Abigail looked up. "For the season," he added. It was not a request, it was not quite an offer, it was something between. Eleanor watched. Abigail considered, then said, "Why?" Nathan held her gaze. "Because you're needed." She shook her head slightly. "That is not the question." Silence stretched. Then, quieter, more deliberate, he said, "Because I trust the work you do." The words cost him something. She saw that. Eleanor saw it too. Abigail closed the ledger slowly. "I will stay," she said, "not for the ranch, not for obligation, but for something neither of them had named. Yet." And the rain continued outside, steady against the earth, as if marking the beginning of something neither had planned and neither would walk away from again. By the 8th morning, the storm had passed, but it had not left quietly. The ground held its memory in thick, clinging mud that pulled at every step. The air smelled of wet rope, damp wood, and the faint metallic trace of rain that had settled into the iron fixtures around the barn. Abigail stood at the edge of the pasture, boots half sunk, her gaze moving across the herd with practiced precision. Loss revealed itself slowly after a storm, not in loud absence, but in small irregularities. A limping steer, a calf that did not rise as quickly, a fence line that leaned where it should not. Nathan approached without calling out. She heard him anyway. "3 down," she said before he spoke. 1 calf, 2 older stock. He stopped beside her, his eyes following the direction of her attention. "I counted 2. "You missed the one near the far line," she replied. "It's not moving right." He narrowed his gaze, then nodded once. "I see it." "Fence broke there," she added. "Water must have rushed through during the night. I'll get it fixed. You'll need help." "I have help." Abigail turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze without fully facing him. "You have men." "That's not the same thing." A pause settled between them. Not sharp, measured. Nathan studied her, rainwater still caught in the seams of his coat from the night before. "You saying they ain't capable?" "I'm saying they are accustomed to being told what to do," she said evenly, "not how to think when the situation changes." His jaw shifted. Not quite disagreement, not quite acceptance. "I'll handle it," he said. "You will begin it," Abigail corrected. "I will finish it." That earned the faintest shift in his expression, not a smile. Something quieter, something that acknowledged the truth in her words without conceding it aloud. He turned toward the barn. "Briggs!" The foreman appeared from the doorway, wiping his hands on a rag. The fence line went. Far east stretch, Nathan said. We patch it before noon. Briggs glanced once at Abigail. You want me to bring? She's coming, Nathan said. Abigail did not react outwardly, but she noticed the phrasing. Not if, not maybe. She walked past him without comment. The fence line ran along a shallow dip in the land where water collected too easily. The storm had carved into it, pulling posts loose and dragging wire into a twisted mess, half buried in mud. Abigail crouched beside the break, her fingers brushing the soaked wood. This wasn't reinforced. It held last season, Briggs muttered. Last season was dry, she replied. That is not a reliable measure. Nathan drove a post into the ground with firm, controlled strikes. The sound cut through the quiet morning air, sharp and steady. We don't have enough timber to redo the whole stretch, he said. We do not need to, Abigail replied. We reinforce the weak points, anchor deeper, double the wire here. She pointed to the section where the ground had shifted most. And redirect the runoff. Briggs frowned. Redirect it how? Abigail stood, brushing mud from her hands. Dig a shallow trench along the slope. Guide the water away before it builds pressure. That'll take time. It will take less time than repairing this again after the next storm. Nathan drove the final strike into the post and straightened. We do it her way. Briggs hesitated only a moment before nodding. All right. Abigail moved without waiting for further agreement. She picked up a shovel, testing its weight, then began marking the line of the trench with deliberate steps. Nathan watched her for a moment before joining. They worked in silence at first. The rhythm of labor replaced the need for words. Shovel into earth, lift, turn. The mud resisted, thick and heavy, but it gave under persistence. After a time, Nathan spoke. You learned that where? Where I learned most things, she said without looking up. Where it was necessary. That ain't an answer. It is the only one you require. He paused, leaning on the shovel for a brief moment. You didn't talk about before. No. Why? Abigail drove the blade into the ground again. Because it is not relevant to what needs doing now. That's so. Yes. He watched her a moment longer, then returned to the work. The trench took shape slowly, not wide, but precise, angled just enough to guide water away from the weakened fence line. Abigail adjusted its direction twice, stepping back to study the slope before continuing. You measure without tools, Nathan said. I measure with observation. He nodded once. Seems to work. It has to. By midday, the worst of the damage had been contained. The fence stood straighter, the trench cut clean through the soft ground, ready to carry off the next heavy rain. Briggs wiped his brow. That'll hold. It will, Abigail said. Nathan stepped back, surveying the work. His gaze moved from the fence to the trench, then to Abigail. You were right. The words came without hesitation, without reluctance. She met his gaze. Yes? A faint shift passed through him. Again, not quite a smile, but closer. Briggs cleared his throat. I'll take the boys to check the north side. Nathan nodded. Go. When they were alone, the quiet settled differently, less guarded, not open, but changed. Nathan leaned the shovel against the post. You should have been paid. Abigail brushed the last of the mud from her hands. Yes, I'll see it done. It is not a matter of seeing it done, she said. It is a matter of whether you understand why it was not done before. His gaze sharpened. You think I don't? I think you were not here to. Silence held. The wind moved lightly across the pasture now, carrying the scent of damp grass and turned earth. The storm had passed, but its effects lingered in every softened line of the land. I left it to Briggs, Nathan said after a moment. And Briggs left it to habit, Abigail replied. Habit does not adapt. You saying I failed it? I am saying it needed more than it had. He held her gaze. And you gave it that? Yes. Another pause, not tense. Considered. You didn't have to, he said. No, she agreed. I did not. Then why stay? The question lingered. Abigail looked past him toward the stretch of land that had nearly been lost. The herd moved slowly in the distance, steadier now. Because leaving would have been easier, she said. And I did not trust easy choices to lead anywhere worth arriving. Nathan watched her, something deeper settling behind his expression. That doesn't answer it either, he said. It answers enough. He did not press further. Instead, he reached for the wire, tightening the last length along the post. His hands worked with quiet efficiency, the motion practiced but not careless. Abigail stepped forward to secure the binding. Their hands moved in tandem, not touching this time, but close enough to register the presence of the other. "You adjusted the feed ratios," he said. "Yes. Saved more than I expected. That was the intention. I noticed." She glanced at him. "You're noticing more now." "Seems I should." "Yes," she said. "You should?" The wire pulled taut, the fence held firm. Nathan stepped back again, his gaze lingering on her longer than before. "You're not just finishing work," he said. "No, you're changing it. Yes." "Why?" Abigail met his eyes fully now, because it needed changing. He studied her for a long moment, then gave a single decisive nod. "Stay through the season," he said again. "Not because you're needed, because the ranch is better with you here." The distinction mattered. She heard it, and for the first time since his return, something in her expression shifted. Not softened, not entirely, but altered. "I will stay," she said. This time it was not about obligation. It was about choice. And Nathan Hale recognized it as such. By the fourth morning after the storm, the ranch had settled into a rhythm that no longer felt like recovery, but something closer to control. The mud had begun to dry in patches, cracking along the edges of the yard, leaving behind a rough, uneven firmness underfoot. The air carried the smell of sun-warmed earth mixed with lingering dampness, a reminder that the storm had passed but had not been forgotten. Abigail stood in the barn, sleeves rolled past her wrists, her hands steady as she worked along the flank of a restless mare. The animal shifted under her touch, uneasy but not resisting. She spoke to it quietly, not in words meant to soothe, but in tone, low, consistent, unyielding. "Easy," she murmured, pressing her palm firm against its side. "You're not as strong as you think you are right now." The mare snorted, stamping once but stilled. Nathan leaned against the doorway, watching. He had been doing that more often. "You've handled horses before," he said. Abigail did not look up. "Yes, not just basic work. No, that one would have thrown half the men out there." "She tried," Abigail said. "She failed." A faint shift passed through him, not amusement, recognition. "What's wrong with it?" he asked. "Strain in the hind leg," Abigail replied, "from the storm. Likely slipped on the wet ground. It is not severe, but if left unattended, it will become so." Nathan pushed off the doorframe and stepped inside. The barn smelled of hay, leather, and the faint sharpness of animal sweat. Light filtered through the slats in thin, dusty beams. "You treating it yourself?" he asked. "Yes. You trained for that too?" "I learned what was necessary." He stopped a few steps away. "That's your answer for everything. It has proven sufficient." He studied her as she worked, the way her movements were precise, controlled, without hesitation. There was no performance in it, no need to be seen doing well. She simply did what needed doing. "You don't ask for help," he said. "I do not require it. That ain't the same." "No," she agreed. "It is not." The mare shifted again, and Abigail adjusted her stance without breaking rhythm. Nathan stepped closer instinctively, one hand coming up to steady the animal before it could jerk away. Their shoulders nearly aligned. The space between them narrowed without intention. Abigail's hand brushed against his wrist as she reached for the cloth beside her. The contact was brief, accidental. Neither acknowledged it, but neither ignored it either. "She'll need to be kept from heavy work," Abigail said. "At least a week. We're short already. Then adjust the load. That'll slow us. It will prevent further loss." Nathan exhaled through his nose. "You always think 2 steps ahead." "Yes, and you expect everyone else to keep up. I expect the situation to be managed with foresight rather than reaction." He held her gaze. "That's not how most of this place has been run, I'm aware." A pause settled, not tense, but waited. Nathan glanced at the mare, then back to Abigail. "You're changing it." "Yes, and you think it'll hold." "I know it will." The certainty in her voice did not challenge him. It grounded something in him he had not realized had been unsteady. "Fine," he said. "We adjust." Abigail nodded once, then stepped back from the mare, wiping her hands clean. "She'll hold if you do. Nathan almost smiled. Almost. That afternoon, the town felt different than it had before his return. Not quieter, not louder, more aware. Abigail stepped down from the wagon without assistance, her boots landing firm on the dusty road. The mercantile stood as it always had, weathered wood, faded signage, the door creaking in the same familiar way when pushed open. The scent of dry goods, fabric, and stored grain met her immediately. Conversation inside dipped, not stopped, but shifted. Mrs. Hargrove stood behind the counter, her eyes flicking toward Abigail with a mixture of curiosity and something less easily named. "Miss Turner," she said, "you've been keeping busy." "Yes, I heard Mr. Hale returned." "Yes, and he brought his wife." The words were not asked, they were placed. Abigail set her list on the counter: flour, salt, kerosene. Mrs. Hargrove's lips pressed together slightly. Of course. A woman near the fabric bolts leaned closer to another, her whisper not as quiet as she intended. 3 years she stayed. And he comes back married. "They always do," came the reply. Abigail did not turn. She had learned long ago that acknowledgement gave such words weight they did not deserve. "Will you be staying on?" Mrs. Hargrove asked, measuring out flour with deliberate care. "For now." "That must be unusual." "It is practical." Mrs. Hargrove glanced at her, something sharper in her expression now. Practicality has its limits in matters of household. Then it is fortunate I am not concerned with household matters. The statement settled. A shift in the room followed. Not approval, not yet, but a quiet recalibration. The door opened behind her. Boots stepped in with a familiarity that altered the space immediately. "Nathan." Conversation thinned further. He crossed the room without hesitation, stopping beside Abigail. Not in front, not behind, beside. "You forgot sugar," he said. "I did not forget it. I chose not to purchase it. You'll take it. That's not necessary." "It is." Mrs. Hargrove watched the exchange closely. "So noted," Abigail said evenly, though she did not reach for it. Nathan set the small sack on the counter anyway. Mrs. Hargrove cleared her throat. "Mr. Hale, your wife has not yet come to town. She will when she chooses." A pause. "Well," Mrs. Hargrove said, her tone shifting, "it will be good for her to be seen." Nathan's gaze cooled slightly. "She doesn't require approval to exist here." The room stilled. Abigail noticed. So did Mrs. Hargrove. "Of course," she said quickly. Nathan turned slightly toward Abigail. "You done?" "Yes." He picked up the supplies without asking. Another small thing. Another cost. They stepped back out into the sun, the light sharper after the dim interior. "You didn't need to come," Abigail said. "I was already heading in. That is not why you entered the store." He glanced at her. "You don't miss much." "No." They walked in silence for a few steps, the dust shifting under their boots. "You let them talk," he said. "They will regardless. You could have stopped it." "No," she replied. "I could have acknowledged it. That is not the same." He considered that. "They're wrong," he said finally. Abigail stopped walking, not abruptly, but enough. Nathan took another step before noticing. He turned back. "About what?" she asked. "That you were waiting." Something in her expression stilled completely. "I was not waiting," she said. "You stayed 3 years." "Yes." "For what then?" Abigail held his gaze. The wind lifted slightly, brushing loose strands of hair against her face. "For what needed to be done," she said. "And nothing else?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. "Too clean." Nathan studied her longer than before, something unsettled moving behind his eyes. He did not call her on it. He did not press further. Instead, he nodded once. "All right." But the word did not settle. Not fully. That evening the house held a quieter tension than before. Eleanor sat near the window, a book open in her lap though her eyes were not on the page. The light from the setting sun cast long shadows across the floor, stretching the room into something softer, less defined. "You went to town," she said as Abigail entered. "Yes." "And?" "The same as always." Eleanor closed the book. "Meaning?" "Observation, speculation, nothing of consequence." Eleanor studied her. "You are unaffected." "No," Abigail said. "I'm accustomed." A pause. "That is not the same thing. Eleanor said quietly. No, Abigail agreed. Nathan entered then, setting the supplies on the table. The movement shifted the air in the room, grounding it back into something immediate. You'll need to check the north pasture tomorrow, he said to Abigail. I am aware. Eleanor's gaze moved between them, something thoughtful settling deeper now. You speak as though this is still an arrangement unchanged, she said. It is an arrangement that functions, Abigail replied. That does not answer my observation. No, Abigail said. It does not. Nathan looked between them once, then turned away, removing his coat. The silence that followed was not empty. It was building, and none of them had yet named what it was building toward. By the 9th morning, the land had begun to settle into a deceptive calm. The sky stretched clear and pale, the kind of blue that suggested nothing would go wrong, though experience had already taught them otherwise. Abigail stood at the long table in the kitchen, the ledger open before her, her finger tracing a line of figures that refused to reconcile cleanly. Something was wrong. Not in a way that showed itself plainly, not theft, not error in simple arithmetic. This was quieter. A pattern that did not align with what she had seen in the fields, feed quantities recorded higher than what had been delivered, costs adjusted in increments too small to draw attention, yet consistent enough to suggest intent. She closed the book slowly. Nathan entered a moment later, the scent of sun and dust following him inside. He removed his gloves without speaking, setting them down with a habitual precision that spoke of control more than carelessness. You've been at that since dawn, he said. Yes, that usually means something's off. It does. He stepped closer, his gaze shifting to the ledger. What is it? Abigail turned the book toward him, tapping the column with her finger. Feed accounts, he frowned. We're short? No, she said. We are being made to appear short. That earned his full attention. Explain. The numbers have been altered over time, she said. Not enough to trigger concern individually. But collectively, she paused, letting him follow the implication. They justify increased purchases that were never fully required. Nathan's jaw tightened. You saying someone's been skimming? I am saying someone has been careful. He leaned over the ledger, his eyes moving across the figures. Briggs? No. You sure? Yes. Why? Because Briggs lacks the patience for this kind of manipulation, Abigail replied. This required consistency, restraint. Nathan straightened. Then who? Abigail closed the ledger. I intend to find out. You'll tell me when you do. I will tell you when I'm certain. That ain't how this works. It is how this works if you want the correct answer rather than a convenient one. He held her gaze. Something in him resisted being kept outside of the solution. Who else has access, he asked. The supplier, Abigail said, and anyone who believed the records would not be reviewed closely. Nathan's expression hardened. We go to town. Not yet. He stilled. Why not? Because confronting them without proof will change nothing, she said. They will deny it, adjust their method, and we will lose the advantage of knowing how it is being done. He considered that, reluctantly. You already have a plan, he said. Yes. What is it? Abigail met his gaze. We placed an order. He frowned. We need feed anyway. Yes, she said, but this time we track every measure ourselves. And when it doesn't match? It will not, she said calmly, and when it does not, we will have evidence rather than suspicion. Nathan exhaled slowly. You've been thinking on this since yesterday, and you didn't say anything. I say things when they are ready to be said. He almost smiled. Almost. Fine, he said. We do it your way. The mercantile felt tighter that afternoon, as though the walls had drawn inward in anticipation of something not yet spoken. Abigail stepped inside with Nathan at her side, her posture unchanged, her expression composed, but her attention sharpened. Mr. Calder stood behind the counter, his smile practiced, his eyes calculating in ways most did not notice. Mr. Hale, he said warmly, good to see you back. Nathan nodded once. Calder. And Miss Turner, he added, always a pleasure. Abigail inclined her head slightly. We require a full feed order. Of course, Calder said, already reaching for his ledger. Same quantities as before? No, Abigail said. His hand paused. We will require a precise measurement, she continued, delivered in our presence. Calder's smile thinned just slightly. That's unusual. It is necessary. Nathan watched the exchange without interrupting. We've never had cause for concern before, Calder said. You've not had cause to believe your records would be examined, Abigail replied. The room quieted. Calder's gaze flicked briefly to Nathan. Is this your concern as well? Nathan did not hesitate. It is now. A pause stretched. Then Calder chuckled lightly, as though dismissing the tension. Very well, if it eases your mind. It will, Abigail said. The delivery came the following morning. Abigail stood beside the wagon as each sack was unloaded. She measured, counted, verified. Her movements were methodical, unhurried, leaving no room for error or distraction. Nathan stood nearby, arms crossed, his presence enough to deter interference. Briggs lingered at the edge, watching with growing understanding. By the fifth sack, the discrepancy revealed itself. Small, but undeniable. Abigail did not speak immediately. She finished the count, closed her notebook, then looked up. You're short, she said. The delivery man shifted. That's what was loaded. It is not, Abigail replied. Calder, who had arrived to oversee the delivery, stepped forward. There must be a mistake. There is, Abigail said, and it is consistent. Nathan stepped closer, his voice low. You want to explain that? Calder's composure tightened. I assure you, you will not assure me, Abigail interrupted quietly. You will correct the discrepancy and account for the previous deliveries. The authority in her voice did not rise. It settled. Firm, unyielding. Calder's gaze hardened. You have no proof of prior errors. Abigail opened her notebook, flipping to the recorded figures. I have records that do not align with your deliveries, and I now have direct observation of inconsistency. That proves nothing beyond a single mistake. It proves a pattern when combined with existing data. Nathan's presence shifted beside her. Not aggressive, but solid. You've been taking advantage of absence, he said. Calder's jaw tightened. You're making an accusation. I am making a correction, Abigail said, one that will continue unless resolved. The silence stretched. Then Calder exhaled, his posture adjusting, calculation replacing denial. You will receive the remainder, he said, and a revised account. That will be acceptable, Abigail replied. Nathan watched her as Calder stepped back, issuing orders to correct the delivery. You handled that, he said quietly. Yes? You knew he'd fold. I knew he would calculate the cost of denial against the cost of compliance, and he chose compliance. Yes. Nathan studied her longer than usual. Something deeper moved beneath his steady expression. You didn't just keep this place running, he said. You protected it. Abigail did not respond immediately. Then, quietly, yes. He held her gaze, and this time, the shift did not stop at almost. It stayed. That evening, the house felt different again, not tense, not uncertain, aligned. Eleanor stood near the window, her attention fixed on the fading light outside. I heard there was trouble with the supplier. There was, Nathan said, and it has been resolved. Yes. She turned then, her gaze settling on Abigail. You resolved it? Yes. Eleanor studied her for a long moment, not with resistance, not with judgment, with recognition. You are more than a temporary solution here, she said. Abigail met her gaze. I am what the situation requires. Eleanor stepped closer, her voice lowering slightly. And what does the situation require now? The question lingered, not about the ranch, not entirely. Abigail held her gaze, steady, composed. That remains to be determined. Nathan watched them both, and for the first time since his return, he understood that what stood between these two women was not conflict alone. It was something far more difficult to navigate. Truth. And neither of them intended to step away from it. By the 10th evening, the air had turned cooler, the heat of the previous days giving way to a slow, creeping chill that settled into the wood of the house and the iron of the stove. The light faded earlier now, drawing the ranch inward, compressing the work into shorter hours and longer silences. Abigail stood at the kitchen table, her sleeves rolled, kneading dough with steady, practiced force. The scent of flour and yeast rose warm against the sharper edge of kerosene. Eleanor sat across from her, a cup of tea untouched in her hands. "You cook as though it is a calculation," Eleanor said after a time. Abigail did not look up. "It is a process. That is not the same thing." "No," Abigail agreed. "It is not." Eleanor watched her hands, the rhythm of them, the efficiency that carried no wasted motion. "You do not do anything halfway. I do not see the benefit in doing so. That must be exhausting." Abigail paused only long enough to brush flour from her fingers. "It is effective." Eleanor's gaze softened, though something in it remained guarded. "And what do you do when effectiveness is no longer enough?" Abigail resumed kneading. "That has not yet occurred." Eleanor let the silence sit between them. It did not feel empty. It felt like something waiting to be named. The door opened. Nathan stepped inside, bringing the cold with him. The scent of dust and horse sweat followed, grounding the room in something immediate and real. "North Pasture's holding," he said. "Yes," Abigail replied. "It will continue to." He removed his coat, setting it aside with the same measured care. His gaze flicked briefly to Eleanor, then back to Abigail. "You didn't need to go out there today," he said. "Yes," Abigail said. "I did. It's handled. It was handled because I went." A pause. Nathan leaned one hand against the table, his posture shifting closer without fully closing the distance. "You don't stop." "No." "Why?" Abigail met his gaze. "Because stopping has never improved an outcome." Eleanor set her cup down quietly. The soft clink of porcelain against wood carried more weight than the sound itself. "And what outcome are you working toward now?" she asked. Abigail did not answer immediately. The question lingered. Nathan watched her. So did Eleanor. "Stability," Abigail said at last, "for the ranch." Eleanor held her gaze. "Only the ranch?" "Yes." The answer came clean. Too clean. Nathan noticed. He did not call it out. But something in him shifted again. The next morning came with frost along the window edges, thin and delicate, tracing patterns that melted under the first touch of light. Abigail stepped outside early, her breath visible in the cold air. The ground had hardened overnight, the mud replaced by a brittle firmness that cracked underfoot. She moved toward the barn without hesitation. Nathan was already there. He did not turn when she entered. He knew it was her. "You're early," he said. "So are you." A brief silence. "You don't have to keep proving anything," he added. Abigail reached for the feed, measuring it out with practiced precision. "I'm not proving anything. That ain't how it looks. I'm maintaining what has already been established." Nathan turned then, his gaze steady, direct. "To whom?" Abigail paused, only for a moment, then resumed her work. "To the work itself," she said. "That's not an answer. It is the only one that matters." He stepped closer, not enough to crowd, but enough to shift the space between them into something more deliberate. "You think I don't see it?" he said quietly. "See what?" "The way you hold everything together like it'll fall apart if you don't." Abigail met his gaze. "It will. That ain't always true. It has been." A pause stretched. Cold air moved through the barn, carrying the scent of hay and damp wood. Nathan studied her, something unsettled pressing beneath his usual control. "You stayed 3 years," he said. "Yes." "You didn't take pay." "No." "You didn't leave." "No." He held her gaze, something tightening in his expression. That wasn't just about the ranch. Abigail's hand stilled on the edge of the feed bucket. The moment sharpened. She could feel it. So could he. "It was about obligation," she said. "That's not what I asked. It is the answer you will receive." Nathan exhaled slowly, his jaw shifting as if he were holding back words that would not settle cleanly. "You're lying," he said. The words did not rise, they landed. Quiet, direct. Abigail's eyes flickered once, then steadied. "I am not. You are." Silence pressed in around them, heavy, close. Eleanor's voice broke it from the doorway. "Nathan." He did not turn immediately, then he stepped back. Distance restored, but not erased. Eleanor's gaze moved between them, her expression composed, but her attention sharper than before. "Breakfast is ready." Abigail set the feed aside. "I will come shortly." Nathan left first. Eleanor remained. "You are careful with your words," she said quietly. "Yes, but not always honest." Abigail looked at her then. "Honesty is not always useful." Eleanor held her gaze. "It is when silence begins to change meaning." Abigail did not respond, because she understood exactly what Eleanor meant. The mercantile felt different again that afternoon, not curious, aware. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes followed Abigail more openly now, less judgment, more calculation. "Miss Turner," she said, "I hear you corrected Mr. Calder. I corrected the accounts. That takes a certain confidence. It takes accuracy." Mrs. Hargrove smiled faintly. "People are noticing. That is not my concern." "It should be," she said. "Perception shapes position." Abigail set her items on the counter. Then perception will adjust accordingly. The door opened behind her. Nathan stepped in. Conversation shifted. Not away. Toward. "Still here," Mrs. Hargrove said to him. "Yes, and Miss Turner as well." "Yes." The simplicity of his answer carried more weight than elaboration would have. Mrs. Hargrove's gaze flicked between them. "People are talking." "They usually are," Nathan said. "This is different. Everything is, if you decide it is." A pause. Mrs. Hargrove's smile thinned slightly. "And your wife?" "She's at the ranch." "Of course." Abigail picked up her supplies. Nathan took them from her without asking. Again, that small, deliberate action. They stepped outside into the colder air. "You don't need to do that," Abigail said. "Yes, I do. No. Yes." A brief pause. "You're making it visible," she said. "Good. That's not always beneficial. It is when it needs to be." She stopped walking. Nathan took one more step before turning back. "Why?" she asked. "Because I won't have you standing alone while they decide what you are." Abigail held his gaze. The words landed differently than anything he had said before. Not obligation, not practicality, something else. "You are not responsible for that," she said. "I am when it's happening because of me." Silence stretched. The cold air pressed around them. "And is it?" she asked quietly. Nathan did not answer immediately. Then, simply, "Yes." The honesty of it settled deeper than either expected. Abigail looked away first, not in retreat, in restraint. That night the house felt smaller, closer. Eleanor sat at the table, her hands folded, her posture unchanged, but her attention sharpened. "You are altering the way this town sees him," she said to Abigail. "I am altering the way the ranch functions. That is not the same thing." "No," Abigail agreed. Eleanor's gaze held. "And him?" Abigail met her eyes. "He is altering himself." Nathan stood near the door, listening without interruption. "And you?" Eleanor asked. Abigail did not hesitate. "I am doing what is required." Eleanor studied her for a long moment, then said, "That answer will not hold forever." Abigail did not respond, because she knew it was true, and because something had already begun to shift beyond what could be managed by requirement alone. Nathan stepped forward then, the space between them tightening once more. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice steady, "we ride the south boundary." Abigail nodded. "Yes." Eleanor watched them both, and for the first time, something in her composure did not fully settle, because what had been unspoken was no longer contained. It was building, and none of them could step back from it now. If you've made it this far, you can feel what neither of them is willing to say yet. But when a man starts choosing who stands beside him in public, it stops being about work alone. The question is, when the truth finally comes to light, who walks away and who refuses to? By the next afternoon, the south boundary stretched long and uneven beneath a pale sky that offered no warmth. The wind moved low across the grass, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant water that never quite reached them. Abigail rode slightly ahead, her posture straight, her attention fixed on the fence line as it dipped and rose with the land. Nathan followed without instruction. "You've been here before," he said. "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes." He studied the way she guided the horse, steady hands, no wasted movement. "You didn't wait for anyone?" "No." They rode in silence for a stretch, the rhythm of hooves grounding the space between them. "There's a break ahead," Abigail said without turning. I don't see it. You will. They crested the rise. The fence sagged near the far post. The wire pulled loose where the ground had shifted beneath it. Nathan exhaled once. You were right. Yes. They dismounted without further exchange. Abigail moved directly to the post, pressing her hand against it, testing its stability. It needs resetting, she said. Deeper this time. Nathan pulled the tools from the saddle. We'll reinforce it. We will prevent it from failing again. He drove the first strike into the ground. The sound echoed across the open space, sharp and final. You always talk like that, he said between strikes. Like what? Like everything's already decided. Abigail tightened the wire, her fingers steady despite the cold. It is decided. The outcome depends on whether we act correctly. He paused, watching her. And if we don't, then we accept the result. That's simple. Yes. He resumed his work. The post settled deeper this time, anchored against the shifting ground. Eleanor asked me something last night, he said. Abigail did not look up. Yes. She asked if I knew why you stayed. The wire slipped slightly in her grip. She adjusted it without comment. What did you tell her? She asked. That I didn't. A pause. And now? She said. Nathan straightened, his gaze fixed on her. I think I do. Abigail secured the final loop of wire, pulling it taut before stepping back. And what do you think? She asked. That it wasn't obligation. The wind shifted, colder now, pressing against them both. You are mistaken, Abigail said. No, Nathan replied. I'm not. Silence stretched between them, heavy with what neither had yet allowed to fully surface. You stayed because you chose to, he continued, not because you had to. Abigail met his gaze then. Choice does not require explanation. It does when it costs something. It cost me nothing. That's a lie. The word landed without force, but it held. Abigail's expression did not break. You assume too much. I've been watching. And observing does not grant understanding. Nathan stepped closer, closing the space she had not realized she was maintaining. It does when the truth keeps showing itself, he said quietly. Abigail held her ground for a moment longer than before. Then she turned, moving back toward her horse. We are finished here, she said. Nathan did not follow immediately, because this time he knew she had not answered him, and that mattered more than anything she had said. That evening, the house held a stillness that did not belong to rest. The fire burned low, casting uneven light across the walls, the shadows shifting with every small movement. Eleanor stood near the window, her back straight, her hands folded too tightly to be at ease. You rode the south boundary, she said as Abigail entered. Yes. And? It is stable. Eleanor turned then, her gaze settling fully. And him? Abigail paused just inside the doorway. He is the same. That is not what I asked. No, Abigail said. It is not. A silence followed, thinner than before, edged with something that could no longer be dismissed. You think I do not see it, Eleanor said quietly. I think you see what is in front of you, Abigail replied. And what is that? Abigail met her gaze, a situation that requires clarity. Eleanor took a step closer. Clarity would require honesty. It would, Abigail agreed. Then be honest, Eleanor said. The air tightened. Abigail held her gaze for a long moment. The fire shifted behind them, the scent of smoke settling deeper into the room. Honesty, Abigail said at last, would not change what is already established. Eleanor's expression did not waver, but something beneath it did. No, she said, but it would change what happens next. The words lingered. Nathan stood in the doorway, unseen by them both, his presence quiet, his attention fixed. Neither woman turned, because both of them already knew something had crossed from unspoken into undeniable, and it would not return. By the 12th morning, the quiet had hardened into something deliberate. No one spoke more than necessary. No one avoided the others entirely. The ranch moved forward, but beneath its steady rhythm, something strained against the surface, waiting for pressure to break it open. Abigail stood in the yard, the ledger closed at her side for once, her attention fixed on the far road. A rider approached, fast enough to signal urgency, slow enough to suggest control. Dust lifted behind him in a narrow line. Nathan stepped out of the barn as the rider drew near. He recognized the man before the horse came to a full stop. "Dawson," he said. The man swung down, his coat marked with travel and something sharper beneath it, intent. "Hail." His gaze shifted briefly to Abigail, then past her, assessing the house, the land, the quiet signs of something more stable than he likely expected. "I came for resolution," Dawson said. Nathan's posture stilled. "You came unannounced." "I wrote," Dawson replied. Nathan's expression hardened. "You did not." A brief flicker crossed Dawson's face. Then it was gone. "Then consider this overdue." Abigail stepped forward, the ledger now in her hand. "State your business." Dawson's attention returned to her fully this time. "And you are?" "The one who has been maintaining what you intend to take," she said evenly. Nathan's gaze shifted, not in surprise, but in recognition of her choice to stand there. Dawson gave a faint, humorless smile. "Then you understand the position better than most. The debt is due." "The debt," Abigail said, opening the ledger, "has been reduced by 40% over the past year." Dawson's smile faded. "Reduction does not erase obligation." "No," she agreed, "but it alters its terms." "There are no altered terms," he said. "Only deadlines." Nathan stepped forward then, his voice low. "You don't set terms on my land." "I do," Dawson replied, "when your land is tied to my contract." Silence tightened. Abigail turned a page, her finger landing on a marked entry. "Your contract contains a clause permitting renegotiation under demonstrable recovery." Dawson's eyes narrowed. "You're interpreting documents you weren't party to." "I'm applying their language accurately," she said, "which is more than can be said for how they have been enforced." Nathan's gaze flicked to her. Something shifted again, sharper this time. Dawson stepped closer. "You think a ledger and a line of ink will hold against a signed agreement?" "No," Abigail said calmly, "but I think preparation will." "What preparation?" She closed the ledger. "The kind that ensures you will not leave this ranch with more than you are owed, and possibly less." The threat did not rise. It settled, measured. Dawson studied her, then Nathan, calculating. "This is not finished," he said. "No," Abigail replied, "it is not." He mounted again without another word and turned his horse back toward the road. The dust followed him out. Nathan remained still for a moment, then looked at Abigail. "You knew that was coming," he said. "Yes, and you didn't tell me. I needed to be certain." A pause. "You're planning something," he said. "Yes." His gaze held hers. "Then next time, you don't stand in front of it alone." Abigail's expression did not change, but something in her eyes did, because this time he had not said it as an order. He had said it as a choice, and that changed everything. By the 13th morning, the sky carried the color of iron, flat and unyielding, as though it had settled over the land with intent. The air was colder than it should have been for the season, biting through fabric and settling into bone. Abigail stood at the kitchen table, the ledger open once more. But this time, it was not the ranch's accounts she reviewed. It was Dawson's contract. Every clause, every line, every word that had been written with the expectation that no one would read it closely enough to challenge it. Nathan stood across from her, his hands braced against the table, his weight forward, his attention fixed. "You're certain?" he asked. "Yes." "You're not guessing?" "I do not guess." He exhaled slowly. "Then say it." Abigail turned the page and tapped the lower margin. "The renegotiation clause is valid under one condition, demonstrable recovery, documented across consecutive quarters. The ranch meets that condition. And he knows that. He knows it exists," she said. "He does not expect it to be enforced." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Then we enforce it." "Yes." A pause settled, but it did not carry uncertainty. It carried decision. "He'll push," Nathan said. "Yes, he won't accept it clean." "No." Nathan straightened, his posture shifting from tension into something more deliberate. "Then we don't give him room to." Abigail closed the ledger. "No," she said, "we do not." They met Dawson in town, not at the Mercantile, not where he held advantage through familiarity. They met him on the church steps where the town could see, where silence could carry as much weight as words. Mrs. Hargrove stood at a distance. Briggs lingered near the hitching post. Even Calder kept to the edge, his attention fixed and careful. Dawson arrived with the same measured control, though this time his gaze did not sweep the space as casually. He had understood the shift, the difference between assumption and preparation. "You chose a public setting," he said. "We chose a visible one," Abigail replied. Nathan stood beside her. Not in front, not behind, beside. Dawson's attention flicked between them. "I take it you've reconsidered." "No," Abigail said. "We have clarified." She opened the ledger, not to the ranch accounts, but to the marked section of the contract she had transcribed in full. "You are invoking a clause," Dawson said, his tone edged with restrained dismissal. "Yes, you believe it applies. It does, and you expect me to agree. I expect you to recognize that refusing it will not hold under scrutiny." A faint murmur passed through the small crowd. Dawson's expression tightened. "You think public pressure alters contractual authority?" "No," Abigail said calmly. "I think it reveals when that authority is being misapplied." Nathan spoke then, his voice steady, carrying without effort. "You had 3 years of absence to take advantage of." Dawson's gaze snapped to him. "I operated within agreed terms." "You operated without oversight," Nathan replied. "That ends now." Silence settled, heavier than before. Dawson looked back to Abigail. "And if I refuse?" Abigail held his gaze. "Then we proceed formally." "With what leverage?" She closed the ledger with quiet finality. "With documented recovery, verified discrepancies in supply, and a clause you assumed would remain unused." Dawson's jaw shifted, calculation replacing dismissal. "You are prepared," he said. "Yes. And you think that will be enough?" "I know it will be sufficient," Abigail replied. Another pause. Then Dawson exhaled, the tension in his posture shifting, not gone but altered. "You will receive revised terms," he said. "Reduced obligation, extended timeline. That will be acceptable," Abigail said. Dawson looked at Nathan once more. "You've aligned yourself well." Nathan did not respond. Dawson mounted his horse without further words and rode out. This time, no one mistook it for unfinished business. It was done. The town did not speak immediately. It absorbed, measured, adjusted. Mrs. Hargrove's gaze softened when it returned to Abigail. Briggs gave a single nod. Even Calder held his silence without defense, because what had been proven did not require repetition. Abigail closed the ledger, not as a task, as an ending. That evening, the porch held the last of the light, the sky stretching wide and open again, the iron edge gone from its color. The air carried the scent of cooling earth and distant grass, the quiet that came not from absence, but from resolution. Abigail stood at the railing, her hands resting lightly against the worn wood. Nathan stepped out beside her. He did not speak immediately, neither did she. The silence between them was no longer strained. It was understood. "It's done," he said. "Yes? You could leave now?" "Yes." He turned slightly toward her. "Are you going to?" Abigail looked out over the land, the fields that had nearly failed, the herd that moved steady and sure, the house that no longer felt temporary. "No," she said. Nathan's gaze held on her. "Not because it's needed." "No." "Then why?" Abigail turned then, meeting his eyes fully. "Because I am choosing to stay," she said. The words settled differently this time. Not controlled, not deflected. Clear. Nathan stepped closer, the distance between them closing without hesitation. "You should have said that sooner," he said. "I was not ready to. And now?" "I am." He studied her, something unguarded finally breaking through the restraint he had carried since his return. "You stayed 3 years," he said quietly. "You held this place together when I wasn't here to do it." "Yes." "I came back with a life already decided." "Yes." "And you stood anyway." "Yes." A pause. Then simpler, more certain than anything he had said before. "I'm not continuing that life," the words landed. Final. Abigail did not look away. Eleanor deserves honesty. She has it, Nathan said. We spoke this morning. A flicker of something moved through her expression, not surprise, but the acknowledgement of consequence already set in motion. And? She asked. I won't keep a marriage built on obligation, he said, not when something real is standing in front of me. The air shifted. Quiet, steady, Abigail held his gaze. And you believe this is real? I know it is. No hesitation, no deflection, just truth. She searched his expression, not for doubt but for certainty, and found it. Then, just as simply, yes, she said. Not as surrender, as agreement. Nathan reached for her hand then, not abruptly, not uncertainly. His fingers closed around hers with the same steady intention he brought to everything else. This time, she did not pull away. The contact held, firm, certain, earned. Behind them, the door opened quietly. Eleanor stood in the threshold, her expression composed, her gaze steady. I will be leaving in the morning, she said. Abigail turned slightly but did not step back. Nathan did not release her hand. Eleanor's attention moved between them, not with bitterness but with clarity. You should have told me sooner, she said to Nathan. Yes. And you, she said to Abigail, already knew. Abigail met her gaze. I understood what was becoming true. Eleanor nodded once. Then at least one of us was honest. The words did not wound, they settled. I wish you both a life built on something chosen, she said. Then she turned and went inside. The door closed softly behind her. Silence returned, but it was not the same silence. Nathan looked at Abigail. Abigail looked at him, and the space between them held nothing unspoken anymore. The land stretched out before them, steady, resilient, no longer waiting for what might return, because what had been uncertain had been chosen, and this time neither of them would walk away from it.